So welcome everybody. My name is Brandi Murphy. I'm the Director of nutraMetrix, and I'm happy to be here with you today to talk about our Staff 1, 2, 3 presentation. And for those of you that have not seen a Staff 1, 2, 3, we're going to start actually with the third portion of the training. So let me just bring up the slides for a second, and I'm going to show you in slide presenter mode what the entire Staff 1, 2, 3 looks like. So let me just make sure that you can see my slides as well. I want to make sure that you can see everything. Okay, get rid of that. Video. Okay, so Wendy, can you let me know, could you see my slides right now? In presentation, not presentation mode, but in screen sorter mode, can you give me a thumbs up if you see my slides? Or shake your head yes, Wendy? Okay, perfect, awesome. So for those of you that haven't seen the Staff 1, 2, 3, let me show you what it starts off with, because I'm going to do the third section today. And I want to give you just a little bit of a background as to the purpose of the Staff 1, 2, 3 presentation. The idea behind it is that we are training the staff or the health professionals on what nutraMetrix is. That's done in Staff 1. So if you take a look here at Staff 1, what is nutraMetrix? What are the goals for a wellness program? And then it goes through the theme that talks about why people need to supplement and why a health professional might want to offer a customized wellness program in their practice. So it talks about how our food has changed, talks about how people aren't getting enough sleep, talks about how people are overstressed, and this combination of poor dietary choices, lack of sleep, lack of stress management, coupled with lack of exercise, really contributes to a lot of the health challenges and chronic diseases that we face on a daily basis in our country. And that no matter what type of practitioner's office we're talking about, whether we're talking about a traditional physician's office, a chiropractic office, an optometrist, a dentist, a massage therapist, an acupuncturist, a physical therapist, no matter what type of practitioner we're talking about, all of them are seeing patients that are struggling with lifestyle choices that are impacting their health. So the first part of the Staff 1, 2, 3 is designed to help the staff understand that. I'm not going to get into that part today, but I want everybody to know that these slides are available in the downloads area of the back office. And so all of you have access to these slides. If you haven't done the Staff 1 part of the presentation with the staff members in the offices where you're working, this is really where the theme of why nutraMetrix comes into play, of why a practitioner needs to implement wellness programs into their practice. Then the second part, which is usually done on the first day. Usually when I'm doing an implementation training in a practice, I'll do Staff 1 and 2 in one meeting, and that meeting might take half an hour to 45 minutes. And then I'll do the segment that I'm going to do with you today in a separate meeting, and that's Staff 3, okay? So far we've talked about Staff 1 being the why behind nutraMetrix, but then as we scroll down and get into Staff 2, that is, what does nutraMetrix provide that are the solutions to why people need to supplement? So what makes nutraMetrix unique? Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Yeah, we
back into it. What I was going through before.
Slideshow mode though, right?
Right, I don't want it in slideshow mode yet. I'm just showing everybody so that you know when you're doing a Staff 1, 2, 3 presentation, or if you're a staff member and you're watching this now, or a health professional, and not all of your people could join today live, right? We know there are going to be some people that watch it live today, and there are going to be some people that watch it on the video, and hopefully we can edit out those technical difficulties from before. But what ends up happening here is I want you to see the Staff 1, 2, 3 presentation is all one giant presentation, but it would take a good hour and a half to get through this whole presentation. And usually you're not going to have an hour and a half of dedicated time with the staff to do a training. They just don't have time for that. So we broke it up into 3 segments, right? And the first segment, that Staff 1 that I was just talking about, Staff 1 is designed to help them understand the why behind why people need to supplement. The fact that people are overstressed, undernourished, not getting enough sleep, and not moving enough. So the why behind why supplementation is what we cover in Staff 1. Staff 2 is when we start talking about the nutraMetrix solutions to educating patients on lifestyle. So we talk about things like our TLS weight loss solution and how it can be customized to a practice. We talk about things like our custom cocktails. We talk about things like the isotonic delivery system. So this really helps the staff understand, okay, they know by the time they've done staff 1, we understand that as a practice, we need to do something to help patients understand that they need to be eating better, sleeping more, getting enough exercise, and dealing with stress. But the nutraMetrix version of that is what we cover in staff 2. So by the time somebody gets to what I'm going to cover with you today, they probably have already or should have already seen staff 1 and staff 2. If they haven't, it's okay. Just schedule time to go back and review that with them. Okay, but I'm kind of picking up a third of the way towards the end in today's presentation. What I really wanted to cover with you is the implementation process. So we're going to start here at staff 3, which is the implementation process. So now I'm going to put it in presentation mode. Can you see that, Wendy?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So we're going to go through and we're going to talk about the implementation process. Now, we're going to assume prior to this point that somebody has already gone into the office and done a discovery meeting and found out what types of products that practice might be interested in. They've probably already done a proposal meeting where they've gone through and proposed the products that would be a good fit for the needs for that practice. And then we're now getting to the point where we're going to start planning implementation. So by the time we've trained the full staff on this segment that I'm going to cover with you today, we've probably already met with the practitioner at least twice, found out what their goals are for the practice, found out what their vision and mission is for the practice, and now it's how do we insert nutraMetrix in a seamless integration or implementation into what it is that they do. Okay, so we've already covered the why, we've already covered the what as to what products are going to be implemented there. Today in the staff 3, we're going to talk about the process. Now I will share with you that this is different for every single practice that we work with because each practice has its own office flow already. And what we're going to look at is how do things already happen in that office and how can we add nutraMetrix to what they already do without making them redo everything that they already do. So let's talk about what the process can look like, right? Because every practice, whether we're talking about a dentist's office, an eye doctor's office, an OBGYN's office, a chiropractor's office, they all already have a process of what happens when a patient comes in the door, right? Patient drives up, they find a place to park, they walk in, and usually there is some sort of check-in procedure. And that check-in procedure usually involves either a piece of paper given to them on a clipboard or an iPad that's set up on the check-in desk. Like let's say, for example, it's a chiropractor and they use the Chiro Touch system. They might already have an electronic way for the patient to check in. But whatever it is, we're going to take a look at how does the patient check in. Usually, if there's a staff member there, somebody is checking to make sure that their address information is still accurate. Somebody is looking to make sure that their insurance information is up to date if it's an insurance accepting practice, right? And so somebody's already doing that. Now we're going to look at what is their current intake form. Do they ask questions about supplementation? Do they ask questions about how do you feel today versus the last time you were there? Now, we give you a sample on downloads, and in your implementation guide, it's referenced of what a wellness intake form could look like for us. Keep in mind, that is really just a sample. They may already have something that they like that works really well for them, and we might just need to add a few questions that they take from our wellness intake form and add to their existing form. If they don't already have one, then what they can do is use our intake form, but it's going to ask simple questions like, do you currently take supplements? If so, what do you take? Where do you get them, right? It's going to ask them how they feel about their health. It's going to ask them how they feel about their health today and how they want to feel about their health in the future. And the beautiful thing about adding this section, and I encourage all of my health professionals at a minimum to add the -5 to +5 dialogue that complements our wellness goals planning poster to their existing intake form, because that helps them track the patient's progress from start to finish and from one patient appointment to another patient appointment, okay? So if they're going to add that, then it's also helpful to have some of the things around the office that duplicate this dialogue. So you could have the poster up. You could have some brochures up. You could have handouts that they're given, right? But basically what's happening is the patient is coming in the office. They're being directed to check in one way, shape, or form, whether that be on paper or whether that be on an iPad or a computer screen. And then they're being asked questions about what are your goals for the visit today? What has changed since the last time we saw you? That's super simple, and it's a great way to introduce the dialogue to the practitioner, right? By doing that right at the beginning of the appointment as well, it gets the patient thinking about the fact that they're going to be talking about wellness and not just their ankle pain from their sprain, which is why they're coming in, if that's the reason why they're there. Right. And so what's going to end up happening then is somebody usually takes that information that is on the wellness intake form and they put it into the computer. If insurance information needs to be updated, somebody usually does that. If they need to change the patient's address, there's usually a staff member that does that. Or if there aren't any staff members, the practitioner might do that themselves. But somebody is putting the patient information into the patient record from the intake form. So now what could happen to nutraMetricize that process is take any of the patient information and open up the staff back office on nutraMetrix.com, which I'll show you some screen captures of in a few minutes. And what they're going to do is create a patient ID, basically register that patient as a preferred customer on the nutraMetrix system. And the reason why we would want to do that, right, is because if, let's say the patient leaves today with a bottle of OPC3 after their visit, or omega-3s, or one of the nutraMetrix products. When it's time to reorder, if they just go online and type in nutraMetrix and go to nutraMetrix.com, if they're already registered as a preferred customer in our system with their email address, when they go to log in at nutraMetrix.com, it'll automatically redirect them to this particular practice, and then any of the retail profit and credit for the sale will be properly tracked back to that practitioner. If we forget to register them as a preferred customer or give them a PC ID number in nutraMetrix and they try to go order online on nutraMetrix.com, they might accidentally get in the batting order and assigned to a different practitioner, which we don't want that to happen. So we make it part of the process when the patient is introduced to a product that they get registered, even if they're not planning on buying online. Now, there may be a few exceptions to that. If you have somebody who just does not shop online at all, then they may not need to be registered, but it's also helpful to register them because you can print off sales receipts for them and be able to give them a receipt with their product purchase. So as we go on, so somebody needs to be assigned. Oops, my desk is raising. I have a raising desk and I forgot to lock it. Let's lower it back down because I can't see my computer. No, I just locked it now. So many technical difficulties today. Here we go. So what we're doing is we are making sure that we're streamlining this process. We're not creating a new task for anybody, right? It takes only a few seconds to type their information in, but somebody's probably already doing that in the office. So then think about what's usually happening. Somebody comes in, they get checked in, they sit in the waiting area or the reception area, and then somebody calls them back to see the practitioner. And usually along the way, depending on what type of practice this is, they might take vitals. They might do blood pressure. They might put the patient on a scale. Somebody's walking them back to the exam room. Then when they're sitting in the exam room, we want to think about what did they see on the way back to the exam room? Are there any products on display? Are there any education stations? Are there any videos that are playing somewhere? What were they seeing when they were in the reception area? So we're going to try to really look to see where can we transform the office to make it an educational facility instead of it just being like, I can't tell you how many times I go into a practice, even as a patient, and what I see on the TV in the waiting area isn't educational. It's things like Judge Judy or the news or the weather station, and it's all stress related, right? It's stress that sells and creates ratings on TV. It's all about drama. So I always joke when I'm in the NC trainings talking about this because I say, isn't it interesting that they put us in the reception areas and they put something stressful on the TV by default. They're not doing it on purpose. They're not even thinking about it, but the patients are getting stressed out by watching Geraldo or some sort of, family feud thing going on the TV, and then they get taken back and their blood pressure is taken. And I can't help but joke sometimes, like, I wonder how many patients wouldn't have to be on blood pressure medication if they weren't stressed out by the time that their blood pressure was taken in the office. But anyway, So we need to think about, what are they seeing on the way back to the exam room, and what do they see when they get in there? Are there educational materials that are health focused and wellness focused for them to read when they're sitting in there? Or do we let them just sit in there and get trapped in their own thoughts? Because again, that's going to stress them out, right? Because what do people typically think about when they have downtime? Right? They might get their phone out and they might check the news. They might start thinking about their to-do list and everything that they need to do. And all of a sudden, they're stressed out again, even before the practitioner gets in there to see them. So why not have something educational and uplifting going on, or for them to read in the exam area? But at some point, the practitioner is going to come in and they're going to talk to the patient about how the patient feels and what the patient's goals are for the visit, and they're going to make their recommendation. So you see the little RX here. This doesn't necessarily mean they're being given a prescription for medication, but they could be. Maybe they're given a recommendation for physical therapy. Maybe they're given recommendation for massage. Maybe they're given a recommendation of a new eyeglass prescription. But the practitioner is going to talk to them about whatever they would talk about in terms of their standard treatment for whatever the patient is there for. What we also want to talk about is the wellness goals of the patient. So if we use that -5 to +5 earlier on, and the practitioner looks at that because it's now been carried into the practice exam room with the practitioner, they can say, oh, I see you're a -3 today. You're having some symptoms that you're uncomfortable with, but you want to get symptom free. You want to get to a zero. Well, here's what we're going to do to get you there. And so they're going to talk about the recommendations in terms of whatever the modality is of that practitioner, whether it be physical therapy or chiropractic or prescription if it's a medical doctor, but also how are we going to support the body nutritionally? And that's where the nutritional recommendation can come in. It's not something we want to do as an afterthought. We want to do it as part of the treatment protocol that is recommended to that practitioner. And then the practitioner is going to write it down. On the downloads area of the back office, we have a form called the nutritional recommendation sheet. And it has on it some of our most commonly recommended or prescribed, so to speak, products, and room to write additional products on it. One of the things that I found very helpful with my own practices is to give them that sheet, or sometimes they create their own with the most commonly recommended products for their practice. And all that they do is they have the practitioner check off the products that they want that patient to consider, and they hand it to them, and they take it to the checkout area. And then when they go to the checkout area, what typically happens is a staff member, if they have one there, is going to give them a handout on each of the products that was recommended. They're going to give them the prescriptions that they're going to take to the pharmacy for their medications, or they're going to give them the prescription for their lab work if they need to get lab work done. So it's done just like every other recommendation that was provided as part of the treatment protocol, whether that be physical therapy, an eyeglass prescription, a medical prescription, and their nutritional recommendation. The staff member is going to hand that to them. They're going to then offer them the product. They're going to take the payment for the product. And if you have the product on inventory in the office, then the patient walks out the door with the product in their hand. If the patient does not, let's say the patient was recommended a particular ingredient that wasn't stocked by the practice, well, then we would make sure that a product gets ordered for them in the staff back office and drop shipped to the patient. When I show you the slides in a few minutes of the staff back office, there is a way to create a printable receipt that the patient can then take with them that will show what products they picked up in the office and what products might be drop shipped to them. So if we go through this, we want to start just thinking about what are things that already happen in the office and what nutraMetrix tools can be implemented into that. So we want to think about what happens at check-in, what happens as the patient's taken back to the exam room, what happens during the exam, what do we do with the wellness coach? And the wellness coach can really just be the staff member that's handling checkout, that answers questions about the product, explains how to take the product, and accepts the money for the product if that's what we're doing. That's really as simple as it comes down to for implementation. We could make it much more complex than that, but that's really the 5 key components that we want to have. Now, if we're working with a practice that doesn't have staff members, then we're going to need to adjust this a little bit because the practitioner is going to maybe be the one that handles some of that. Right? Now, here's a sample of what the wellness goals form or the wellness intake form looks like. That if you are going to use the whole thing, it could ask them about their diet. How many servings of fruit do you eat per day? How many servings of vegetable do you eat today? How many servings of grains do you eat per day? Now, the practitioner, depending on how much they're going into nutritional interventions, they may or may not want to ask those questions, but at least put those health goals on there, -5 to +5. The beautiful thing about that as well is, sometimes patients don't realize how much they've improved over their last visit. And so they might forget that when they were in the last time, they put themselves down as a -4. And today they only put themselves down as a -2. Now the practitioner can say, see, we made progress. Or they might have put themselves down as a -2 today, and they were a -1 before. Okay, then we might need to adjust something. So keeping a copy of those forms from one visit to the next is a great tracking tool to see how the patient has responded to the products that we're recommending. So now, when I talked about the check-in and I talked about the staff back office, the picture needs to be updated just a little bit, but when you go into nutraMetrix.com and you go to the area to log in as a PC, there is a button that says staff. And we register the staff member by going into the health professionals back office and clicking on their nutraMetrix tab under my account. When we do that, we can just put a staff member in just with their name and their email address, and they'll be sent a login on how to access this staff back office. Once they log in with their email address and the password that's sent to them, they can enter the patient's demographic information and create the new PC ID for them very easily. This does not need to be done in the unfranchised back office. It can be done right on nutraMetrix.com. And the beautiful thing about that is usually nutraMetrix.com is cookied to only one patient. The other people. Okay. Anyway, so what we're going to look at is there's no cookies on the staff back office. So you can go from one patient to another patient to another patient right away without logging in and out between them. Okay. So they're going to create the preferred customer. Once a preferred customer is created, all the PCs, preferred customer information will be in a drop-down list. So if the patient was already registered in the past, they can just select that patient that they want to maybe place an order for or create an auto ship for. Then you can create a business card for them that has the practice portal address on it, and they can just write on their login information and take it with them, and that's given to them at checkout. So what happens when the patient's taken back to the exam room? Again, as I said earlier, this is going to depend on what their existing process is. If they don't have staff members that do that, it's going to be the health professional that's looking at the exam, the patient intake form on the way back. If they have an assistant, right, the assistant can ask them to make sure that the form was filled out. They can review it with them, talk to them about the health professional's new wellness program, and then even offer the recommendations for them right then and there, depending on how involved this particular wellness coach or assistant is in the implementation process. It can be very, very simple. When the health professional's doing their exam or performing their mode of treatment, right, they just want to try to think about how can I support this patient nutritionally with products that we have. Maybe it's as simple as the patient asks because of things that they've seen around the office. They'll say, I saw some supplements out there. Can you tell me a little bit about them? Or even they might just ask a question like, should I be taking a multivitamin? Or what can I do to lose weight? Or what can I do to avoid having to go on blood pressure medication or to avoid having to take cholesterol medication, right? And so we're going to look at what the patient's history is and what the patient's goals are, and then what products can support those patients' goals with nutrition. We teach the nutraMetrix consultants to work with the staff, and this is done in the proposal meeting, to put together packages as small, medium, and large, right? And those small, medium, and large also help to meet the needs of the patient where they are from a budget standpoint, from a commitment standpoint, and just from I don't know if I want to take 7 products, but maybe I'll take 2 or 3. So we're going to meet the patients where they are from a pricing standpoint and from the number of products that they're going to take. Now, if we have a wellness coach, the wellness coach is not the NC that works outside of the office, but maybe a staff member in the office that can answer questions about the products and show them how to take it. I'm sure there are people on this call right now or in this Zoom that have had their own customers or have worked with a practice that have had patients not read the instructions on how to take isotonics. And as a result, they thought the little over cup that is what you're supposed to mix your product in was the serving cup. So they filled it to the line with powder. And then when they added water to it, it bubbled up all over the place like a third grader's volcano project in science class, right? We want to make sure that the patient knows that the little white screw-on cap is the serving cup, and then you pour it in with 2 ounces of water. We have some handouts that can be helpful in showing the patient how to take that, but somebody needs to give that to them. When we're presenting the wellness options to the patients, they've already done the wellness intake form. We might have the poster on the wall where we can reference that -5 to +5. They've already been seen by their health professional to address the concerns. So this isn't a strange thing to talk to them about nutrition. We're talking about how the nutritional products can support that structure or function in the body that the patient is concerned about. So the wellness intake form is really such a great tool for introducing the patient dialogue. How do you feel about your health today? How do you want to feel about your health in the future? And if there's a difference between where you are today and where you want to be, then we need to take steps to get you there. And one of the steps that we're going to take to get you there is adding some nutritional support into what it is that you do. Additional ways to engage practice. Sometimes you might say to the patient, are you happy with your current health? If you keep doing what you're doing today, would your health improve? And usually by dialoguing with the patient about this, they'll open up to you and say, no, I know I'm not eating the way that I should, or no, I know I'm not getting enough sleep. And so now you can introduce a product to them that can help them with that. So we've already done the work in the proposal meeting with the practice to help them understand how the products that we've selected or that the practice has selected can help support the patients nutritionally. At this point, when we're going through the implementation process, we want to make sure that the staff understands back what we covered in Staff 1 and Staff 2. Patients need supplementation because they're not getting everything they need from food alone. They're not getting enough sleep. They're not getting enough exercise. They're not dealing with stress enough. And as a result, we have chronic diseases that are contributed to by our lifestyles. Supplements can help overcome some of those obstacles, right? So we're going to talk about it from the why, then to the how, and then to the what. So we might say to the patient, you have symptoms of inflammation, right? So antioxidants can help reduce inflammation because, and then you go into whatever product you're recommending for that, right? So I'd be comfortable with you taking an antioxidant. This is the one that we recommend and why, and go into explaining the isotonic delivery. Now, you do want to point out to them that they can take any antioxidant, but this is the one that this particular practice recommends, and maybe it's the health professional takes it themselves, maybe it's the benefit of the isotonic delivery, or if it's not an isotonic product, for example, our curcumin, talking about how the ingredients in curcumin are shown to have better bioavailability, right, through the BCM 95. We're going to just make sure that we talk about the unique benefits of each individual product. Now, keep in mind, I talked about the fact that there's posters available. You can also order these little tear-off sheets that can be, they're kind of like a regular piece of paper size that can be easily inserted into the patient file as well. And then along with that are educational brochures that you can have around the office that talk about the fact that people need to supplement. They're not getting enough they need from food. If we don't make it, we need to take it. Talking about how to optimize our health, talking about customizing our needs. You know, an elderly man is going to have different nutritional profile needs than a young child. So making sure that we're meeting the needs of that particular patient where they are. Then when we're doing the checkout, I kind of already talked about this on the process slide. We could really do this whole segment just from that slide. When we hand them the product, we're going to also hand them the patient ID card that tells them how to reorder the product by going onto the website and what email address they are linked to, how they log in. And then the staff member is ordering the products, providing that how to take isotonics form, and really handing them the product, and they're on their way. Now, where do you create the receipt? I showed you in the staff back office, you can select any patient from the drop-down name. You can also type in the name of the products and the search results will come up. And then you say, okay, I'm going to add this one to the cart. When we add that one to the cart, we can say, okay, this is for the in-office pickup. We can change, that's where it says on-site. We can change the quantity. We can add in if we're going to charge an admin fee or something like that. And then we can also say if we need the product to be shipped. So what you'll see here is these two products, OPC3 and the DNA Miracles multivitamin, were picked up in the office, and then another OPC3 was added to be shipped later, right? We can even enroll them in auto ship directly from this. So now what we want to think about next is how do we customize with the particular practice? How do we customize follow-up, right? Well, what do they already do? How do they follow up with patients after an appointment now? Some practices already have a very elaborate follow-up process. For example, my chiropractor's office. If I go to my chiropractor and I don't call them back within a day or two to book my next appointment, I get an email from them automatically checking to see, how are you feeling? Did you have any relief from your appointment? Can we see you again next week? So for them, it's really easy just to add another question about, are you taking your supplements? Do you notice anything, into the email they already send out. If a practice isn't sending out follow-up emails, what are they already doing? Some of them have newsletters that go out to the patients every month that just remind them of upcoming events in the office or upcoming featured products. Remind them that they might need to call in and reorder their products. That could all be right on the newsletter that goes out to the practice. If the staff members are calling the patients as follow-ups, which some practices do that, they have a staff member that calls them after their appointment just to check to see how they're doing or to make sure that they went and got their labs drawn. Whatever they're doing, find a way to incorporate nutraMetrix into that conversation. It doesn't have to be creating something new. It is, what do they already do to follow up with their patients? And then how can we just add a question about nutraMetrix with that? Now, this is also going to vary depending on how many times that practitioner sees that patient on an ongoing basis. Some chiropractors, for example, see their patients every week or every other week. Some MDs might only see their patients twice a year for wellness checks, or when that patient gets sick. If it's an eye doctor, they might not see their patient again for 2 years until they need their prescription adjusted. So we need to just think about, what are they already doing to make sure that the patient comes back on their regularly scheduled appointment, and how can we incorporate a nutraMetrix question into that? Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about just very quickly is what we've been talking about so far is the first phase of implementation. And we usually encourage our practitioners to limit their first phase introduction to just a handful of products, 3 to 5 products maximum. And the reason for that is we want to get this process down. We want to make sure we know, how are we tracking inventory? Who on the staff are helping with the checkout process? Who is registering the patients as a PC? And who is doing the follow-up? Once we get all of that in place with a handful of products, it's really easy to add additional products later, right? So phase 1, we keep it to a handful of products and focus on getting the implementation strategy down. Once the implementation strategy is down, which that could take 3 months to do that. In a really busy practice, it might take 6 months to do that. It really depends on how involved the practice is. But once we have that practice down and we feel like it's running smoothly, then we can always go in and train the staff on additional products and the practitioner on additional products. Maybe we invite the health practitioner to one of our online summits. We just had one last week focusing on mental health. And they might participate in an online summit and say, I could benefit from that product. And now that they've learned about that product, we just blend that product in with the existing implementation strategy. So by the time that we are getting to phase 2, now the product offering in the practice is going to expand because we've already gotten the process down. By the time we get to phase 3, now we might be adding in more complex implementation strategies. This might be when we customize products based on genetic information and we implement GeneSNP into the practice. Or maybe we create a customized weight management program following on full 12 weeks or 13 weeks of education for the patients, right? This is usually when we get the practice to the goal that they told us. When I want to be a fully integrated wellness practice, this is where we're doing that. It's not just 1 or 2 products or 3 or 4 products. Here they might have a wide selection of products that they're implementing. They might be customizing their services for their patients. But we typically don't start there. We typically break it down into bite-sized pieces. Phase 1, let's focus on the process. Phase 2, let's add a few more products in and see how we do. And phase 3 is when we get to the goal of how do we really implement a customized wellness solution into this practice. So we have to think about all of this that I'm talking about in staff 1, in staff 2, and in staff 3. They're really designed to introduce the staff members to what we're doing. But we're not going into an incredible amount of detail because we don't have a whole lot of time with them. We might come back later and do a dedicated product training, right? We might come back later and do help the practitioner create a wellness event for their patients. So we have all of these different planning processes or education processes. We have education for the patient, we have education for the staff, we have education for the practitioner. And so depending on what phase we're in, there's just some tools that you might want to look at. We want to make sure that the staff members understand why nutraMetrix, why these products were chosen, and how to implement them. We want to make sure the practitioner understands what products they're offering and how to bring them up to the patients. We want to make sure that the patients understand why isotonics, for example, and maybe we do a patient tasting or have a Wellness 101 in the office, a general health seminar for the patients. Maybe we do a weight management overview for the patients. But these are all things that we want to plan out during the initial staff training. And then we're going to figure out, okay, if there's staff members involved, what's each staff member's role going to be? How is that staff member going to work with the NC to make sure that all of the steps are in place? What are going to be the daily activities for each staff member? And then how do we track the progress? Are patients buying product? Are they feeling better? Are they getting improved patient outcomes? Is the practice meeting revenue goals, right? Because part of this as well is to bring additional revenue to the practice in addition to improving patient outcome. Well, if we're introducing the products to the patients, but they end up not buying, that's not helping the patient or the practice. So we want to make sure that we have successful implementation strategies in place that benefit both the patient and the practice. And that's really our overview of the staff presentation. It's designed to be something that we can do in a short period of time, 25 to 30 minutes, then answer questions of the staff members, and then get to the next appointment where we go into more detail about the products. Does anybody have any questions about that?